Be honest with me, as honest as you possibly can. Can you truly and honestly, if a gun is to your head, name 5 teams and only 5 that you can guarantee come the end of the season, come the end of the Premier League action, name 5 and only 5 teams that you think will be in the top 5 of the Premier League? Because I'll be honest, we're 9 games in. 9 games. I know it doesn't seem like a lot. There's still 29 games to go. And 9 games doesn't seem like a lot. But usually by this time, with 2 to 3 months of action, you generally have an indication, or you generally know where the season is heading towards, what teams are on the right track, what teams aren't on the right track. But as I said, we're 9 games in and I have no clue, 0 clue. And I'm sure many, many of you, if you're not lying, are the same. I'm guaranteed that, I absolutely guarantee that many of you are in the same position where you can't give 5 and only 5 teams. Because I'll be honest, there's about 9, maybe 10 teams for 5 spots. 5 spots and 10 teams. But let's take a step back. And, let's make this process a little bit easier. Because let's be honest, Liverpool, Arsenal, and Manchester City are absolute guarantees in that top 5. And you can't convince me otherwise. Unless something absolutely catastrophic happens, those 3 are guaranteed to be in that top 5. So let's omit them. So now all of a sudden, we've got 6 teams for 2 spots. Because that's 3, it's 2 more spots left. So 6 teams and 2 spots. But let's make it even a little bit easier. Because, Tottenham are top of the table. And I didn't put them in as a guarantee because I think that at some point we will start to see Tottenham decline. Unless this becomes like a Leicester season. But I do honestly think at some point, God forbid an injury to James Maddison or something, Tottenham will start to fall off, I think. Tottenham, I cannot absolutely guarantee that they'll be in the top 5 with City, Arsenal, or Liverpool. I think at some point they could fall off. But for the sake of it, let's say Tottenham are also a guarantee. So that's 4 guarantees. Now all of a sudden, that's, 6 teams, 2 spots. So 5 teams and 1 spot. Maybe even 6 teams and 1 spot if you include West Ham. And those 5 teams that I'm thinking of are Aston Villa, Newcastle, Brighton, Manchester United, Chelsea, and as I said, maybe West Ham. Maybe you could throw West Ham into that mix. 5 teams in 1 spot. That is absolutely ridiculous. And they're all playing pretty well, barring Manchester United and Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea are starting to come into their own. Those injuries, that injury pile-up is starting to dwindle, and they're getting their players back, reintegrating them, and they're starting to look a little bit better. They should have just won that game against Arsenal a couple days ago. I mean, truly, basically bottled that game. But, Chelsea are starting to come back into it, and despite how bad Manchester United are, that they're going to be in and around that 5, 6, 7 spot. Probably not top 4 like last year, unless, they can really get back into the groove of things, but probably around that 5, 6 spot. And then Newcastle, at the start of the season, United were playing bad, Chelsea were playing bad, and we had some doubts about Newcastle because they got absolutely popped by Aston Villa in the first game of the season, 5-1 or whatever it was. And then all of a sudden we started to have doubts about Newcastle. They have Champions League football. How would they deal with that, pressure of Champions League football, playing, twice in a week, maybe 3-4 times, with the cup competitions as well? How would they fare? And, in the first couple of games, we started to doubt Newcastle. Many people started to doubt Newcastle and think that they might actually fall out of that top 5. But then they've just gone and turned everything around, and they look like the team that they were last season, if not even better. They're popping PSG, a, Champions League staple nowadays, a European juggernaut, popped them off the park. I forgot what the score was, 4-0 or whatever it was. And, they had a respectable draw against AC Milan. And look, they look on it. And they look like they should be in... they look like they're back in contention for those spots. But then Aston Villa, all of a sudden, look absolutely incredible. Winning 6-1, 4-1, scoring as many goals as you like, with a, very stable defense. Ollie Watkins on top, up top, in the form of his life. Douglas Luiz... Leon Bailey, that's who I was forgetting. John McGinn, player after player after player after player at Aston Villa are all playing, that whole team, and the way Unai Emery after having a full season, his first full season now, having the full off season, and now coming into this season, he's really got them playing how he wants them to play. And they, look like they're on a similar level with Newcastle, but most importantly with Aston Villa. These teams that they're beating are in and around their positions. And they're probably going to be the teams that they're fighting for. And if they're popping them off the park like they did West Ham, now all of a sudden you have to take into account for Aston Villa being up the top as well. And then Brighton, Brighton have been struggling, but then you have to remind yourself that they've had a tough stretch of games as well. Aston Villa beat them. Liverpool, they grinded out a draw. Manchester City, obviously, that's as tough as a game you're ever going to get in the Premier League. So they've had a tough run of games. They don't look like that quite up to the levels that they were last season. And there is Europe, but Brighton, we know when they're playing well, they're, up there with maybe not quite at the levels of Newcastle, but they're up in and around that range with a Newcastle and an Aston Villa. So Newcastle seemed like they should be a shoe-in. Aston Villa seemed like, with their newfound form, they should be a shoe-in. And Brighton usually are in and around those positions, but we only have one spot. And then we can't, as I said, forget about Manchester United. We can't forget about Chelsea. And West Ham, they started well and they look like they should be in and around those positions as well. But I do think West Ham will fall back down to earth and they'll go back down in the middle of the table. So I think we can leave West Ham. If they do come back into those sorts of positions, fair play. But I don't think West Ham will. They have the Europa League as well. They're going to be fighting in that. I don't think they will be there. As I said, that leaves 5 teams of one spot. One spot, that 5th spot, coveted spot now, really, because, with that Champions League expansion, that extra, slot in the Champions League may go to the Premier League and that 5th spot. So that could become a coveted spot now. 5 teams are all fighting for that one spot. And as I said, we can't get ahead of ourselves. It's only 9 games into the season, but I could truly and honestly say that, come, May and April and May, those teams could be there. Truly, if everything goes well for them, they don't see major injuries to their key significant players, they'll all be there. There's no way Newcastle, if they don't have major injuries, won't be there. There's no way Aston Villa, with the way they're playing right now, maybe some of those players come back down to earth, like an Ollie Watkins. Maybe he starts going back into his usual default range of goals. But, the way he's playing, it seems sustainable for Aston Villa. The way they're playing, the manager that they have, the pedigree that they have, really, who's to say they can't, sustain these performances and these results? So Newcastle, Aston Villa, Man United and Chelsea will obviously come back, and Brighton, I think they all are well within their rights to be up near that 5th position come April, come May. And to be honest, I think we'll be seeing all 5 of those teams fighting for that spot come April and May. And to be honest, for as much stick as we've given the Premier League for, Manchester City being the dominant team and the only team that really seems to win the Premier League, and it seems unfair as ever, the fact that we have 5 teams fighting for one spot and we have 10 teams fighting for 5 spots, it shows how talented the Premier League is still. Despite how inevitable Manchester City seem, people tend to forget how dispersed the talent is around the Premier League. This league is 20 teams deep at that. Well, maybe not this season, obviously because of, Luton Town and Sheffield United and those newly promoted teams. But most of the time, you could easily say that the Premier League is 15 teams deep. You could have 15 teams that could really give you a run for your money, even if you're a Manchester City. No matter how good they are, they still drop, points and lose games to some of these teams. We just saw them lose to Wolves, right? And that was a tough game. The Premier League is deep and it is talented, and there are teams after teams after teams that have individual players that are well within their rights to be playing in those top 3 or 4 teams. But you see them dispersed around the whole league. Almost every single team has a player that has the ability, to go play in a Manchester City or an Arsenal. Maybe not as a starting player, but they could be a very serviceable player for them. If they were up, if they were to get promoted into those top 6 clubs. Almost every single team. You know, you look at Aston Villa now with Ollie Watkins. You look at a Newcastle. You know, they have countless numbers of players. Nick Pope, you know, Kieran Trippier, Alexander Isak. All of them could, you know, are well within their rights. You know, Brighton, Matoma, Evan Ferguson, West Ham, Ward-Prowse could easily be playing for Tottenham. Crystal Palace, obviously Eze, incredible player. Elise as well. You know, who was it? Eze, Elise, I think, was meant to go to Chelsea, and so, you know, he's definitely has the talent to be in that, you know, top 6 range of teams. Wolves, Pedro Neto, absolutely balling. He's been incredible in the start of the season. Fulham, Palhinha, you know, he was poised for a move to Bayern Munich. But look, at the end of the day, this is going to be a fun season. Because as I mentioned, we're looking at 5, 6, 7 teams that are gunning for one spot come the end of the season. If we forget about the guarantees, I mean, you know, we take Tottenham back, as I said, that's easily 6 teams fighting for one spot. 6 teams, one spot, come the end of this season, April, May, every single game matters. Every single point matters. Every single performance matters. You know, you lose one player here, a red card, a yellow card even, you know, with suspensions. Every single decision, every single play, moment could become exceedingly significant, exceedingly important as we go further along into the season. So if you're an Aston Villa, a Newcastle, a Brighton, a United, a Chelsea, a West Ham even, or a Tottenham, you need to be watching your every single move as you progress into this season. And you need to take care of these players. You need to make sure you're rotating your squad. And we're in for a mad dash, probably, hopefully, you know, 9 games in, but hoping for a mad dash, because it could be one of the most entertaining seasons in the Premier League in a while. Because even at the top, Arsenal and Manchester City will go toe-to-toe, and Liverpool, don't forget about them. They will be sneakily behind those 2 teams, and they are well within a shout to win the league. It's an exciting, exciting league, and even down the bottom, the relegation battle is as, you know, muddy and slimy as ever. You know, it's teams that haven't won a game at all yet. And the Premier League is the best league in the world for a reason. It's exciting, and hopefully all those teams go have a shot come the end of the season, and we see a mad dash to the end.